Well, there's an awful lot in there. I won't try and unpack all of that today. A few weeks ago, maybe it was months ago now, the year's already off to the start, I don't know. There was a report in one of the papers, of a senior officer of the court giving a speech at a think tank or something like that. And she was very critical of a thing called the Red Mass. Now, the Red Mass, if you know, is a mass that goes on all around the world. I think it's an English-speaking event primarily, but the Archbishop will offer a mass for lawyers, officers of the court, jurists as well, and they turn up, and it's called the Red Mass. I don't know why it's the Red Mass, but it's the Red Mass. She said, this very senior woman, the problem she has with this, why it shouldn't be encouraged or even allowed, is that it implies that there's a higher power than that of the court. Well, I've got news for her. There is a higher power than the court, than human law, and thanks be to God for that. Now, the 20th century is a graveyard of people who argue the same thing, ideologies as hers. There is no higher power than the positive law of the court, choose left or right, and many innocents were slaughtered under that extraordinary wheel of torture. There is a higher power, and if only more leaders realised it, perhaps there'd be more justice in the world. There is some accountability for dictators, torturers. In any case, with all due respect to her, she couldn't be more mistaken. The Red Mass is a good thing. It reminds those officers of the court, and those who make the laws for that matter, that there is a higher than the divine law. Jesus in the Gospel today is employing his not unusual or infrequent use of shock and hyperbole. That this law to which you and I are called is not merely a law that we can nitpick. We can't do, as many lawyers have paid very well to do, find small details that allow us to evade their client to be justified. The spirit of the law that Jesus Christ is revealing is that law of love, that higher law, that law that orders all other laws, all human laws, emanate from the possibility of order which comes from God himself. And it's a loving order. In our Catholic tradition, intellect and will, love and reason, if you like, are intertwining all the time. At certain points in our history and different small t traditions within the capital T tradition of Catholicism, you'll get some that emphasize one over the other, if you like, emphasizing the will and obedience to the law over, say, the capacity for us to reason and understand the rational ordering of the world under God's innate logos, in the Greek is reason. Those who tend to stress, this is in very broad terms, the idea of God's infinite freedom and the darkness, if you like, of his law, the fact that we can't comprehend it, it's beyond us. The most we can do is obey it, submit our wills to it. That is a certain tradition that can lend itself at times to great authoritarianism within and without the church, outside the church as well. You also see it to some extent in the Reformation, where Luther says the law is the great accuser. It reveals our inadequacy to live according to the law. All is grace. Well, we believe as Catholics all is grace as well, but we also believe that we can cooperate with that grace, which is its own grace. That the law of God is not merely extrinsic, external, out there, that we can also, we also have this capacity to understand it in our hearts and our minds. That we have a tradition that brings together the will, the love, and the intellect. And whilst we can't pretend to fathom, as Paul reminds us today, the depths of God's wisdom, we can participate in that wisdom when we use our minds. We're not asked to leave our brains at the door when you come in here. Quite the opposite. We have such a rich, nuanced, subtle, and spiritually profound intellectual tradition. And it's that we are part of. And so it's the balance that we're called to embody in our own lives between the life of the mind and the life of the heart. When it comes to the law, yes, we believe it's surpassed by divine law, which is mysterious and at times hidden. Revelation is this back and forth of the manifestation and the hiddenness of God's will, which is his love and his reason. But it's not a case of it's the vibe. We believe there's far more going on with God's, the emanation of reason that comes from God that you and I can participate in as a church. We live in a tradition that is profoundly reasonable and deep and loving and faith-filled. The extraordinary thing about a reason is that left to its own devices, it's sort of neither here nor there. We can use it for whatever end we want. But when, through God's grace, we can transcend even our reason to understand and begin to plumb more deeply the mysteries of faith, then our reason transcends itself. We're now into a supra reason, if you like. It's only possible by God's grace and faith. And so theology opens up. Theology is not just jurisprudence. It's not just interpreting the law. Jesus Christ didn't give us just another version of Leviticus. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. He's happy to say that at times. But what he's offering is something much, much richer than just a list of rules or statutes. He's not throwing a law book at us. He's giving us his very self on the cross, his flesh to eat, his blood to drink, a love affair with God to which you and I are invited to participate with, yes, our hearts, but our hearts and our minds together, our whole person. That's the beauty and richness and wholeness of our tradition. So we're called to think critically, to study deeply. It's not everyone's vocation to be a theologian, thank goodness. But nonetheless, it's part of our tradition. It's also so important that we do say yes to that which we can't fully understand. And it's in that tension that we live our lives as disciples. But when Jesus is saying here, I've come to fulfill the law, it's to go beyond the meal. It's not just about what can I do, what's the bare minimum. He's saying there's so much more than that. We're called on this spiritual adventure of the most profound depth of our love, our will, but also our minds, using whatever gifts we have. And when we do that, we participate in the Trinity. God is somehow alive in each one of us, quickening our souls and our bodies, allowing us to enter into his extraordinary inner life. Now that's a far lot more than a mere book of statutes or some sort of jurisprudence. It surpasses anything like that. And so with all due respect to that senior officer of the court, yes, thanks be to God, there's a higher law to which we can strive, a higher law which you and I can live within, a higher law